The same is true of immigration. The left is not trying to give away the story, and the right is not mean-spirited. Both have credible arguments about why immigration reform needs to be considered and why border security needs to be considered. So in my notion that Congress should work, Congress should be informed, I want to share with you a little bit about how serious I take this. I've had 2 sessions where I sat with an immigration law judge, a retired immigration law judge, to ask him to educate me specifically on the status of 11 million. We can talk about border security in a minute, but specifically on the status, educate me. And I can tell you this, and we know this, much of this is common sense, there's a bell curve to the 11 million. We're going to use the term 11 million, maybe it's 12 million, we're going to use 11 million tonight. There's a bell curve. You have some on one side of the curve who have egregiously violated the law, knowingly, with the intent to commit a crime. This goes to being the nation of laws. Okay? Now that might be a small minority of the 11 million. Who knows what that number is? How do I know that? Because there are 1 million people of that 11 million who have gone through the adjudication process that we as a nation of civil laws offers. 1 million people have gone through that process and have been adjudicated as not having a legal means for claiming residency or immigration status here, and have thereby been given removal orders under our laws. Well, those laws need to be enforced. Now, on the other side of the spectrum, if we use intent as the one test on this side, if we use that same question of intent on the other side, then we have to rightfully acknowledge that there are children that have come here without the ability to act with volition, without the ability to act with intent. And that has to be a different standard of criminal culpability, because they're not capable of making that decision. So what do we do with that bell curve? Well, first we recognize that every person from number 1 to 11 million might be different. Then what do we do on border security? Because I also, as a part of trying to do my job, have met with consular officers who engage in the interview process. And they will tell you that one of the greatest frauds we have right now is marriage fraud. One consular officer sat with me and said, in 3 years, he had the same person apply for 4 wives. That means we have a real problem. And just as the left is not trying to give away the story, the right is not being mean by insisting that we actually should enforce our current laws and call marriage fraud when it's marriage fraud. We also know that the border is not secure. And we can do everything in the world we want to begin to address the 11 million people that are here illegally, wherever on that bell curve that you think they stand and what the right answer is. But if we are never addressing the issue of how many people continue to come here illegally, then we are never solving the issue. Ever. Ever. Truly. For those who say, we're a loving and caring nation, all 11 million should have a change of status tomorrow. Imagine a world where that happens, but we don't have border security. And we're going to have 11 million more people here 10 years from now. And we've never fixed the problem. That's the third way. The third way is to recognize that we can have an adult conversation that eliminates the toxicity about this, the divisiveness, the rhetoric, the vitriol, and says we can be a nation of laws, and we can also be a loving and caring nation. So what does that mean legislatively? I think legislatively, the Senate bill is dead on arrival now. It's not going to happen. And we resign ourselves to that as being the final conversation on immigration? I don't think we need to. Because that also means we resign ourselves to having the final conversation on border security. The two go hand in hand. I think we divide up that bill by title, by provision. And I think the House should work its will on behalf of the American people that members of Congress are elected to represent. And I'm going to tell you what I think we should do strategically. Put border security on the floor first. Because I actually think we would get 300 votes between Republicans and Democrats to support border security provisions. Then put marriage fraud on the floor. Then put visa technology on the floor. I think a number of these common sense measures actually pass. And then let's address what we do with the 11 million that are here currently undocumented. And let the House work its will on that. Because I can tell you, you will see a reflection, I believe, in the votes of the Congress that reflect that bell curve between those who came here without any volition and those who came here with absolute criminal intent and should be removed. It's enforceability. Some would say, we already have every law we need if it's just enforced. Perhaps that's true. But we know we are dealing with a problem right now with those who, with the 11 million, that the law does not have a sufficient solution for. If we don't address it today, then that number becomes 15 million. Now, I'll also tell you my own strategy, my own philosophy. I don't care what the economic and tax impact is about bringing those 11 million into legal status. And we can discuss this in Q&A, but here's why I don't care. Because we're a nation of laws, and what matters is right and wrong. And the economic benefit of making a decision that otherwise should be made based on what's right or wrong shouldn't influence the debate. We should make the decision based on what is right under the law, not under what is right based on tax rate, in my opinion. At the end of the day, what I would hope we can honor in any debate and any legislative conversation we have about this is the following. During the special election campaign, which I mentioned earlier, I had the opportunity to meet with a couple who approached me, and they run a florist on Park Boulevard in Melbourne. They're from the UK. They are here under a business visa that every 5 years has to be renewed, but part of that business visa is they are not eligible under the business visa to transition to a residency application or citizenship. Now, if that couple who has done everything legally, has followed our laws, who has employed now 10 to 12 people right here in Pinellas County, does not have a pathway to citizenship, then we have to insist on the same level of justice for everybody. We cannot dishonor those who have tried to abide by our laws and immigrate here legally and contribute to our society and employ people. We cannot begin to adjust the status of those who have come here by breaking our laws without acknowledging those who have rightfully come here under the current laws of the system, and they themselves do not have a pathway. Somewhere in there, we have to find justice for both. It is a difficult issue. I know that. Listen, this is a tracker's dream to have a Republican candidate talking about immigration on a college campus. I know that. But I also know members of Congress and frankly every elected official at every level is entrusted to represent the community that sends them to office. I take that very seriously. I believe that I should do my job and the Congress should do its job. Let the House work its will, because we haven't done that yet. And I will tell you, I think we end up with something that involves a lot more border security than it does simply adjusting the status of 11 million people. But we need to bring it to the House floor. And I understand that puts me in the minority of my party to suggest that we need to bring it to the floor, but I believe we do, because we're elected to do a job. I appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening, and I would be more than happy to engage in any Q&A right now. Listen, let me talk about immigration. If you want to talk about something else, that's great too. Frankly, that'd be a lot easier for me to talk about something else than immigration. But anything that you find appropriate, I'm happy to engage in Q&A. Chambers, I would prefer the Senate flip. Others would prefer the House flip. I understand that. But I would like to see Congress moving again, and then also requiring the President to own things. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
So you've been sort of touching on this subject, but I've been forgetting the key word in immigration, which is refugee. So what is your perspective on immigration regarding these people at the border as refugees and as such people who can't return to their home countries because of various restrictions?
Well, so refugee is a legal status. And refugee status is something that's afforded by our laws based on a clear evidence of refugee status. It shouldn't merely be a declaration of convenience to suggest I'm here as a refugee. We do have to authenticate what drives that status. And so I will ask you a question. Take the children coming from Central America. Some studies have shown there's more risk of violence in our inner city neighborhoods than some of the cities that they are coming from. So does that call into question the ability to apply for refugee status? It might. Now, I'm not taking one side or the other on that, but to turn our head to it and just suggest because you're a young child who went through what is a crime to get here because somebody put you on a train, does that qualify you for refugee status? I think it depends. It might. It really might. But here's another question for you. If we had a mechanism by which we could responsibly and lovingly return children and adults to their country of origin, where we knew they were being returned to a safe place, so if they came from a neighborhood that was violent, but we were able to return them to a government-provided facility in their home country that their safety and nutrition and welfare is provided for, that better represents responsible immigration policy and frankly put in the hands of every individual that's returned a tactic on how to immigrate here legally. It's a false choice, I believe, to suggest that only the United States is capable of providing safe and responsible housing, nutrition, and education. Frankly, I think it's an insult to the very countries that some of these children come from that their own nation can't provide the same. And honestly, with the amount of foreign assistance that we provide, tie the foreign assistance to a government's responsibility to take care of their own people. We can do that. There's a way to do that. So if we provide $100 million in foreign aid to a Central American country, I think it's right that we say spend $50 million to provide responsible, safe housing where vaccinations, nutrition, and education is provided for the children that otherwise are being put on trains to come to the southwest border. Because I can promise you this, that young 8-year-old kid who arrives here terrified is not inheriting the American dream. They're inheriting absolute chaos that is disruptive to them without any family unit and any cultural tie. Now, if their family support, government support, and cultural support could be provided in a home, the only home that they know, are we better off spending $1 billion in Pasco County or $1 billion in Mexico City to provide for kids from Mexico? That's an honest conversation we can have, and it doesn't have to get vitriolic and divisive. Consider it. If you have a Mexican child, perhaps their childhood is best spent in the culture and community and near family that they know and have been risen in and best understand. And if it means that we are instead spending money in Mexico City instead of in Pasco County, perhaps that's the wisest use of our dollars.
So then would you say the amount of money allocated for border security would be equal to that of the work you made as starting recently in those countries, or this should be?
I think it depends on shifting priorities. I can tell you we woefully underfund